Everyone. So happy to see we have a very large turnout today. We have a lot of information to provide, so we'll get started. My name is Tammy Pintabona. With me, I have Nicole Mullen and Marcy Elmore. Nicole will be giving a quick demo of the ACECRL release before handing it off to Marcy, who will walk you through the FDA screens. The webinar will be recorded for future use, and we also have attached many of the FDA manuals to the webinar under the handout section. The food manual will be mailed or emailed to all webinar participants after the webinar today. Today we will be using an updated 1507 version, which is not yet in production. The version that we're going to be using will look and feel just like the current version that you're using, but will contain a lot more validations inside of the PGA screens. These validations will eliminate many rejects by making sure that users are entering correctly formatted data. Marcy will talk more about this later on. During the webinar, please submit any questions you may have, and we should have time at the end for a Q&A session. If for some reason we do not have time to get to all of the questions, we will be creating an FAQ document and sending out to all participants. Before I hand this off to Nicole, I just want to put up a quick poll to find out all the users on the call today, how many have processed ACECRL release, how many, and if you have not, just please let us know, just so we can get an idea of what information we need to really focus on besides FDA. Okay, so it looks like that's good news. So it looks like there's probably about 4 or 5 users who have not processed any ACECRL release. Hopefully after this webinar, you will have the information you need and feel comfortable enough with the screens to get started. So right now, I'm going to hand it off to Nicole, who will just give you a brief overview of ACECRL release and GIS.
Hello, everyone. Like Tammy said, I'm going to briefly go over, I'm going to focus on ACECRL, but I'm going to bring up something that should be familiar to everyone. I'm just going to start with a CRL transaction that's been marked as ACE. So I have a CRL entry up right now. The screen on the front here, this transaction screen, should look very familiar to everyone. Nothing has changed on it, so I'm just going to go ahead and badge the entry to go to the release entry editor screen. And first and foremost, I want to bring everyone's attention to the top where you can see the ACE box. This is checkmarked as of right now, which means that if I were to transmit this CRL, I would be sending the entry summary via ACE, and the release would still be going through the ACS system. I'm going to leave that check mark. The screen should look very familiar. I wanted to go ahead and go down into the line. And I have selected a tariff number for seed potatoes. And the reason I've done that is because I wanted to bring attention that when you are in a CRL entry, if FDA is required or if anything should flag, you'll notice in this little box down here, you can use the up and down arrows to actually read the descriptions of what may or may not be required. Again, since we're on a CRL transaction, the OGA tab is highlighted. You can only utilize the PGA tab if you are in an ACRL transaction. So again, I just wanted to bring everyone's attention. The OGA is highlighted. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And for just to stay consistent with the next entry I'm going to show you, I've just chosen to disclaim FDA as normal. Until February 28th, if you have any live PGA, or I'm sorry, if you have any live FDA entries, you'll need to do those as a CRL. So that's why I just wanted to show you. No, FDA. Yeah.
FDA's been opened up.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Oh, good. Okay. My apologies. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to show you on the line is that the line entity items, the ones that are required on the line are the consignee and the manufacturer. The consignee and the manufacturer, since it is required on every single line, I know that people might be concerned with having lengthy entries that have multiple lines and having to go ahead and manually enter this data. So I wanted to just bring to everyone's attention on the release entry editor screen, from the defaults dropdown, you should be able to select the entry defaults. And from here, you can enter your manufacturer ID as well as your ultimate consignee, and those will actually drop into each and every one of your lines. So that is basically the rundown for a CRL. Again, not much has changed, but I just wanted to talk about it briefly. And if anybody doesn't see this ACE box yet, if you could just let us know and we can make sure that you are set up correctly, but everyone should be turned on for that. So now I'm going to go into an ACECRL transaction. And again, everything on the front screen is going to look familiar. Nothing's changed there. I do want to just make sure that when you are selecting your transaction type, if you hit the ellipsis box, you should have ACECRL now down at the bottom of your selections. So I am doing an ACECRL, and when I badge the entry, there's a couple changes. You'll notice that the ACE box is grayed out and disabled. And when you are transmitting an ACECRL, that means you're sending the entry summary and the release through ACE. The other thing that I wanted to make mention is here on the entities ACE cargo release portion, you'll notice that we now have this grid where you used to have the ultimate consignee selection. Now you have a grid. When you originally started entry, these fields will be blank. If you hit add, a box will pop up that'll have all 4 of the required portions for you to fill out for your buyer, your consignee, your manufacturer, and your seller. I know that there's been quite a few questions about this portion, so I just wanted to briefly explain that on this portion, on the header level, you want to have one of each type of entity. So you would not want to have multiple buyers, multiple manufacturers. You just want to select the 4 mandatory, have one of each. I know some people have also brought up the fact, well, what if I have multiple manufacturers? And again, just go ahead and select the one that covers the majority of your entry, because the next portion that I'm about to show you is when you go into a line on an ACECRL, what will actually happen is your consignee and your manufacturer will now automatically fill in at the top of the line item entities portion over here in the upper right hand corner. So if you did have multiple manufacturers and you selected one on the header level that didn't apply to a specific line, you would just go into that line, and from there you'll be able to edit. So I went ahead and you can tell which one you have highlighted because it'll highlight in blue, and then you can edit the party from within the line itself. So moving right along, I wanted to go ahead then and get into the PGA portion. Now, again, I stayed with the seed potatoes HTS number, and the first thing that I wanted to point out is the PGA tab is highlighted. We still have the same flags, but you'll notice now that there's this portion immediately after the code showing PGA. So that's a nice little indicator to let you know that you are in an ACECRL entry, and if it applies, you should be using the PGA tab to transmit that information electronically to customs. I'm just going to go ahead and hit the PGA tab to show you. I have an FDA disclaim in here, for example, and all that I did, I'll go ahead and hit add so you can see the blank screen. The first thing that you'll want to do is select your agency. I'm going to go ahead and hit FDA. My program, you'll notice there are a whole bunch of selections here, but Marcy's going to get into those more in detail. I just wanted to go ahead and show you the disclaim at this point. You'll see right here in the center it says FDA disclaim only. You can go ahead and select that. And with the disclaim popping up, you'll notice that there's now a disclaimer box because that program was eligible for disclaim. So it only pops up when it's applicable. So I'll show you guys that as well. There's the A code or the B code, whichever one would apply, you would then select. And same thing goes for NHTSA, for example. If you had a NHTSA agency, the program There's one for the off-road vehicles, and if you select that, that is the one that'll bring up the disclaimer. So again, I just wanted to show everyone that. If any paperwork needs to be submitted to CBP for any reason, you can go ahead and use the DIS module. With APHIS now being live, you can go ahead and submit things electronically. That happened yesterday. But if you were working on an entry and it for some reason requested documentation to be submitted, I did just want to briefly go over the DIS module with everyone. So I'm going to go over here onto the home page, and under other modules, you'll see I have it highlighted in red here, the ACECRL imaging module. I'm going to open that up. Your screen is going to come up and look blank. So if you hit File, you can then do New or Open. Since I already have one filled out, I'm just going to select Open, and you'll see here you have your basic search and your advanced search. So this should all look pretty familiar. I'm going to go ahead and open up the one that I have already started. On the general, the message type, this will actually be highlighted in yellow, but it'll be blank. So for this instance, if we had docs to submit to CBP, I would do document submission. The action code's already going to be filled in. It is a mandatory field. It should have the ADD already filled in there for you. But if you needed to go back in and delete something or replace something, those options are available. The other thing I wanted to touch base on is on the general header tab, the documents. There's nothing here that indicates that any type of document is required, but this is the portion right down here where you're actually going to be selecting your document to submit to CBP. So I have one already here, which I'll hit edit to go over. Your document image file info tab, at the top, you'll need to select a document label. So I was pretending that APHIS supporting documents were due. So from the ellipsis, there's a long list of documentation that you can select from. So I've gone ahead and hit my APHIS supporting docs. The next thing you'll want to notice is there will be, I'm going to actually back out of here and show you, when you go to pick a file for your document, you'll also notice that no file data has been attached. That's to let you know that you actually still haven't submitted any type of documentation. So you'll see this. But when you actually do select a file to upload to CBP, that's going to disappear as it has right here. And lastly, at the bottom of this screen, you'll see the government agencies. There's an ellipsis for you to select any and all appropriate government agencies to supply documentation to. There's all as well as APHIS. So for this example, I'm just going to select APHIS. And if you hit add, it will drop on down to the box here that shows and lets you know which actual agency is going to be receiving the documentation. You might have multiple agencies. So for this example, I'm also going to select CBP, hit add, and now this documentation is going to go to both APHIS and CBP. If you hit OK, then you can go to your transaction data. The transaction data screen up at the top, the transaction category, you'll want to go ahead and select that this is associated with a specific transaction. And from there, you'll want to put in under your entries tab, your filer code and your entry number, again with no dashes. And this works a little bit just like the front screen did, where you'll want to actually hit add to have that number drop down here into this grid. From there, you will have to save the entry. So save, and once you've saved it, you can go ahead and then do file transmit. I believe I've already sent this one, yeah. So I already sent this one out, and just to show you what the transmission looks like, this is the original transmission that I sent on 1/18, and you can see that it says outbound. And my response came back immediately, and you'll notice right here in this portion that it says initial validation has been passed. So again, that's just briefly to go over with you the DIS. We do have a manual, so if I went too quickly or if anybody has any questions, we can get that manual out to you. Also, everyone should be set up for the module. So if for whatever reason you don't have the module on your home screen, again, if you could just let us know and we'll work to get you set up for that. Just some bullet points to share with everyone before I pass the demonstration over to Marcy. If anybody wants to make note of these. Simply stated, ACECRL transaction types, you should be using the PGA tab, and CRL transaction types, you should be using the OGA tab until February 28th, at which time the OGAs will be completely moved over to PGA. At this time, all entry types, except for entries that start with a 3, can and should be processed as an ACECRL. At this time, you can transmit FDA disclaims, NHTSA, and APHIS. All of the manuals will be provided to you for all active PGAs. If you have questions, please revert back to those first prior to sending in a help ticket. They will walk you through the PGA process step by step. There is a cert environment available to those who are interested in testing the software for the PGA, so if you're interested, please let us know. SmartBorder does have the ability to copy any products from a client's product library that have OGA information and pull the majority of the relevant information into a PGA record. Tammy has additional information regarding this, and she'll be sharing it after the webinar. There are some fields that would still require you to manually fill them in, as this would depend on the PGA that applies to your product. And in relation to that, I forgot to mention, if anybody has some products that they wanted to add, I'm just going to briefly show you where you can do it. Some people were a little bit lost as to where the PGA screen is. So I'm just going to quickly go into a client profile here really quick, pull up my product list, and I'm going to just select a random product. It shows that it's got some FDA information. If you go to your tariff number section and you hit edit or add, either or, you're going to get brought up to your tariff information screen. Right here, this big bright green button, this is where you can go ahead and click to add the PGA information. So this screen should look a little bit familiar from my demonstration, and it should look very much more familiar once Marcy goes through the FDA portion. But again, that's where you can go ahead and start adding some PGA information for, you know, random commodities that you know might need it. You can get a jump start on that. Coming soon, we are working on releasing a ABI message that will populate in your entry when you have used the DIS module and your submission has gotten the received with no errors message from CBP. What'll be really nice is that'll actually pop right into your entry, so you won't have to constantly be monitoring the DIS module to see if your docs have been accepted. So that's nice, but again, coming soon. And finally, just to go over with you guys, I'm going to scroll down here so you can see what I'm talking about as I'm talking about it. The SO messages are the replacement to the RR message, which is the customs release message. This can be seen when viewing your ABI messages in an entry. Also, you will now receive a 1USG message, which will replace the FDA may proceed when transmitting PGAs. The 1USG message will be found in the body of your SO message. And if you do not receive a 1USG, not all releases from the many possible applicable PGAs associated with your entry have been provided. And that is all that I have. So I'm going to turn it over to Marcy.
Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everybody. My name is Marcy Elmore. I'm the business analyst here with SmartBorder, and I've been involved in the FDA PGA project for quite some time now, and it's exciting to finally be in the home stretch. I'm going to be going over the SmartBorder user interface and giving an overview of a few of the different FDA programs and how the software will be used to transmit the PGA information. As a reminder, this is an overview of the software. I encourage you to learn all you can about any new FDA requirements that may come hand in hand with the switch from OGA reporting to PGA reporting. There are periodic FDA and ACE webinars that are coming out. I encourage you to watch for the CSMS messages that come out. They've been coming out at a fairly rapid pace lately. Get yourself signed up for any of them as they come out. Pay close attention to those CSMS messages. Any information that you can arm yourself with is just going to make your transition to PGA that much smoother. And as we move through my presentation, please feel free to submit any questions you might have regarding the software user interface for the FDA programs. We'll get to as many of them as we can. And as a reminder, this session is for an overview of the software and is not intended to address FDA requirements specifically. Those questions should be fielded to your FDA team or ABI rep.
And just as a reminder, the go live date for FDA reporting through ACE PGA is February 28th. All right, give me just a minute to hold up for you. Bear with me here. Okay. All right, I have created an entry with multiple lines just to be able to show you some of the different programs and how to work your interface. I'm going to start where everybody is interested, and mostly, and that is with food. I'm going to go right into the PGA tab. This is an example of a food entry where prior notice has already been received. The first thing you're going to do is enter your agency code, and in this case, obviously it would be FDA. Your agency processing code is going to be whatever your commodity falls into. We've got biologics, cosmetics, medical devices, drugs, food, radiation-emitting products, tobacco, and veterinary medicine. And for this example, we're going to select food. The processing code is the type of where your food falls into: additives, ceramicware, dietary supplements, feed, natural state food, and processed foods. So I'm just going to go into the example that I already have set up for our demo here. And since this is an entry where prior notice was previously received, you'll see that I have entered my fake prior notice number here. Any mandatory fields are going to show in yellow, which is typical for SmartBorder applications. Also, I wanted to bring your attention to the ellipsis. If you click on the ellipsis, it's going to bring you right to the ORA product code builder. And I'm sure you're all familiar with building your product codes. Choose the select and close to pop your FDA code into your entry, and it populates here. This section here, should your commodity require genus and species name, that would be entered here. Source processing information, this is where you are going to put your country information. For example, place of growth, country of refusal, country of source, country of production, country of shipment. And this ellipsis here under source country is your typical ISO code, and you would go ahead and choose your country. Trade brand name information, self-explanatory. That's your trade name, brand name. I'm sure you're all familiar with that already. Characteristic description. You're going to enter in what do you have, and in my case, I have 1 pound packages of strawberries. Now for product entities, this is where one of the areas that requires, as you're submitting your FDA entries, it differs from program to program. We have gone ahead and tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. You'll see in this pick list here, there's a mandatory designation next to some of the parties. We've done that throughout all of the PGA, the FDA programs, just to better guide you. And you would go ahead and choose the mandatory entities that are required, fill in your required information, and you would do that for each entity. The entities do fall into the grid here, as you can see where it says DEQ, DP, to help you keep track of which ones you've already chosen. I know in some cases there can be up to 8 that are required, so that is where you find those. And remember to keep an eye out for the mandatory designation. That'll guide you into the ones that you need. Affirmation of compliance, for this product it is not required, but I will show you that here. The ellipsis brings up any affirmation of compliance codes that could be applicable to what you're entering. and you would go ahead and choose whichever one is applicable and enter the information here. We'll go a little more in depth in this section in one of the other examples. Lot value numbers, in here is where you will find your line value. We do have a change coming for this section to give it a better name to help guide the user that there is information in this section that is a mandatory field. As of right now, validations will guide you to any mandatory fields that were left blank. We are working towards some enhancements to make that a little more user-friendly from this view here, but that is something that is coming down the line. Your packaging section here is just as it always has been. You can enter up to 6 different packaging levels. You start with number 1, which is your largest outermost package. Then you would go to 2 and 3 and so on. Arrival status information, your drop-down is going to give you a calendar. Pick your anticipated arrival date for the prior notice, and enter your port name. There's a port pick list here. You can go ahead and pick it right from there. And once you have all of your required information, you would click OK. As you can see, I had a validation pop up telling me that port name is required, and I have not entered it. So it'll bring me right to this field. Go ahead and enter your port code, select it. It'll populate that port name as well, and the validation goes away. So that is an example of food with prior notice having been received. This next example is where prior notice information is being sent. Again, you choose the applicable agency. In our case, it's FDA. Program is going to be food. And for this example, I chose natural state food. I'll go into my example here. All right, and again, as in the other example, any mandatory fields are highlighted in yellow. Since I already have this filled in, source processing is a required field, but I already have it filled in. And if, in this case, because it's prior notice, source type code 262 is a mandatory field. So that actually defaulted and will be caught in validations should you not enter something there. It requires the place of growth. I enter my source country and click OK. And again, for food, you can do different multiple source processing codes. Trade brand name information we went over already. Product characteristics, same thing. Now for the product entities for prior notice shipments, also going to have that mandatory designation, and you'll notice that here there's a designation that says manufacturer may be required. Know the requirements of your products, especially when it comes to entities. This stuff is pointed out in the manuals that you all will receive, just so it's a little bit easier to understand. You'll see it in the manual. Not all entity roll codes are the same between prior notice already received and sending prior notice information. So you'll want to know the differences in what entities are required between those two programs. That's where it seems to be the most confusing. So familiarize yourself with that. There's just some slight differences, but we have gone ahead and designated what may be required. So that's what that means there. And again, your entity roll codes, the ones that you've already chosen that are required, are here on the right-hand side of that pick list. Okay, affirmation of compliance. When you put in an affirmation of compliance, you will notice there's a section here that pops up in the middle. We are working on the validations for this to guide you on what the requirement is for that affirmation of compliance. Let me try to find one here. I think this shows better later on in a different entry, but it shows what the, we'll say, license number has to look like, whether it's alphanumeric, and I'll find a good example of that. That'll help guide your users also. Again, lot value numbers. This is where you would enter your PGA line value. Packaging is the same as the previous. And arrival date, arrival port, same as previous. So the user interface stays pretty much the same between programs. There are variances in some of them for sections that are not needed, additional section for those that are needed, where you can enter optional information as well. So that is that example. And let's see what else we have here. Okay, this first one here is going to be biologics. Same thing. You're going to choose your agency, choose your program, and choose your processing code. In this example, I've chosen allergens. In this example, you can see intended use code is a mandatory field. The intended use code pick lists are pared down to only what is needed for that program. We've tried to make those lists applicable only to the program you're working in. So they're a lot smaller, I believe, than what used to exist. So you would go ahead and choose your whatever intended use code applies. Product code number is the same as before. This constituent elements. This is where you would add any active ingredients. You'd ask for active ingredient. You'd put the name of the active ingredient. In this case, I think we use sorbitol. And please understand this is all made up information. I really don't know what the requirements are for sorbitol, but you can either put in the percent of the active ingredient, or you can put in the quantity. And that falls right into the grid. Source processing type, in this case, there's no grid for this one. This program requires only one source type. So you would put in whatever source type applies, and you would pick your ISO code. Trade name information, same as the other programs. Characteristic description is the same as the other programs. Entity role codes, same as before. All mandatory for this program are designated. So you would go ahead and fill all of those in, or they would default from your product list. Affirmation of compliance. This is where you're going to put in your affirmation of compliance code. As you can see, this center section here has popped up a 4-digit number. It says 0000. That's to guide the user on what that BLN number is supposed to look like, how it's constructed. So in this case, as you can see, 0 equals number. It's a 4-digit number. And that's what this section is for. There are some where it gets a little crazier, where the requirement is the number starts with an H and it's a 10-digit number. You will have that guidance there as well. Remarks. If you wanted to add remarks of any kind, this is where that would go. You can add general remarks. You can add a name of a contact individual for a product or whatever. That goes in this section. Lot value number, same. That's where your information is going to go for your PGA line value. Should you have any lot information, it will go here. Your production start and end date, any of that information would go here. Packaging is the same. Container, if you had containerized goods, you could put your container number here and your arrival, your anticipated arrival date here. In this example, or in this program, port is not required, so that is not highlighted. Now if I click the OK, I'm going to get a runtime error. At this point, when you click OK, if there are any validation errors, they would come up there. The validations will catch any missing affirmation of compliance codes. Anything of that nature would be caught in the validations. Keep in mind that the validations are there as a guide only. You know, if you get a reject, obviously, go back in and enter what needs to be there. The programming can't catch all of those issues. So sometimes there's things we just can't program for. For example, there's an affirmation of compliance code out there that is required if there's some sort of stamp on the package. There's no way we can program for that. So you have to know your products, know what is required by FDA and any of the applicable PGA agencies. Okay, in this example here, I have cosmetics. Cosmetics differs a little bit in how you enter the agency and program code. Agency is still going to be FDA, program code is going to be cosmetics. And as you can see, there's nothing in the processing code ellipsis. That's because there's not one required for cosmetics. So you would simply not enter one and move on. And here you can see all of the, again, all of the information that's required is highlighted in yellow. Any other ones that you go into will be highlighted in yellow. Like I said, at this time, you do have to go into each section and see which ones are required and simply enter them and click OK. So at this point, this is pretty much the demo for the PGA programs for FDA. The user interface for drugs, devices, tobacco, radiation, and veterinary medical all fall in the same look and feel. As you go in there, each one does highlight all of the mandatory fields. If there are any questions, if you have any questions, please submit them through our question through the webinar on the question field. But just to let you know that we are building our validations to be as robust as possible. And as I said, in some cases, due to the nature of the requirements, it isn't always possible. The validations are a great way to guide the user, but don't rely on them to always catch what is wrong. And although I'm not an FDA expert, I can suggest that users be aware of the intended use code requirements, as well as the affirmation of compliance code and the entities that are required for the different programs, because these three areas seem to be the most confusing. And keep in mind that the more information you provide electronically to FDA, the likelier you are to get that one USG message. Some points to remember: go live for PGA reporting is Sunday, February 28th, 2016. They are not going to change it. It has been stressed that they are not going to change it. So be ready, arm yourself with knowledge. Stay informed. Watch any CSMS messages that may convey informational session information. Sign up for any applicable informational sessions that pertain to your type of business transactions. Contacts. Know your various contacts and who to go to for software-specific problems and issues and FDA-specific problems and issues. As I stated a few times, for validations, we're building them to be as helpful as possible. Use them as a guide only. Do not rely on them to fulfill all required fields. Areas to become familiar with: affirmation of compliance codes, intended use codes, and the required entities. As I stated already, those seem to be the three areas that have been the most confusing. Even in the development and programming, there's a lot of moving parts to those. So if you can familiarize yourself with those and the requirements and where to find the information that you need, you'll be way ahead. Information on these areas is in the FDA supplemental guide. The current version is 2.4 as of this presentation. I do know that 2.4.1 is going to be coming out soon. We'll look to those and have any updates done, as quickly as possible. We do not know at this point exactly what is changing in that version, but from what we understand, it is not huge things. So we should have those pretty quickly. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Tammy Pintabona.
Thank you, Marcy. First, let me just start off by saying that Marcy has done a lot of work directly with FDA to get all this information. She's very knowledgeable. Marcy has also worked very closely with the programmers to come up with these validations. We know that FDA is one of the most complex PGAs, so we're trying to get as many validations in the system as possible. The system that we're using today, and I had referenced it earlier, is an updated version of 1507 that's still in our development environment, because Marcy wanted to show you exactly what validations we have and what we're working on. So Marcy, right before this call, had gone to the programmers with some additional validations that she wanted, and it looks like they went in and tried to update development when she was doing her webinar, which caused the runtime errors. So, of course, Marcy's going to do her testing, and once these validations get to live, that, cross our fingers, will not happen to you. But while we're compiling the questions, I just wanted to say that I understand that many of our users may be overwhelmed. This is a learning experience for all of us, and we are learning as well. Support is here to assist in any way possible. Created manuals for each of the agencies, and in some cases, each of the programs within the agency. We are also offering one-on-one training if you feel that will help. Our goal is to create the best possible product. We need your feedback and suggestions to get to that point. Right now, we've given you a system that is compliant with each of the agencies and with customs. We know there's more that we can do to make it user-friendly. That's where you come in. Get into those screens. Start sending the data. Write down your ideas. Send them to us. This is still a work in progress and will be for quite some time. CBP is constantly making changes. You may ask a question yesterday and have gotten an answer. You ask that same question tomorrow, the answer could be different. Take, for example, the webinar we did Monday. As of Monday during our webinar, you needed to be in the LACI and the FDA pilot in order to transmit. As of yesterday, late, the CSMS message came out. They opened that up. So PGA's ACECRL release can be done by all users. You can send LACI, FDA, and NHTSA, which is DOT. You can do those today. We are doing the best we can to get this information as quickly as it comes out and relay the information to you. We've also hired 2 new support reps. This will allow us to provide faster assistance to our users. We also are quicker to pick up the phone. We know that everything that you submit to us is time sensitive, and we don't want you to get frustrated. So what we're asking you to do is log into Parature, update your contact information so that we can have that information right away to give you a call. We know a lot of the questions that are coming in, especially regarding ACECRL release and PGA. It's not just a quick email answer. It needs a little more explanation and maybe a go-to meeting setup. A lot of times we found that within 5 minutes we can clear up any frustrating issue that you had so that you don't have it again in the future. So a lot of you on the call may have already started receiving these phone calls from us. We are also ready to extend the support hours if needed. Right now, our regular support hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If we need to start earlier and stay later, we're ready to do that as well. We'll just we'll see what happens as we get closer to that February deadline or mandatory date. Okay, so now it looks like we have a list of questions, so we'll go through our questions. The first few are regarding PGA. So Nicole, what are the questions?
Okay, I have one here that says, do I have to open each section of the PGA screens to see what is mandatory? So at this point, as Marcy went through her demonstration, the answer is yes. Tammy had mentioned earlier too, we're constantly updating and adding validations to streamline the process, and this is where we'll need your feedback and suggestions, but at this point you will need to go ahead and open up those different screens in the PGA to see if it is required or not. The next one that we have here is, how do I know what FDA program applies? That's a really great question. Unfortunately, that is not something that SmartBorder can help you with, as we do not have all of the information that is required to make that decision. So again, we would highly suggest that you, work with your importer and FDA or entry specialist, any type of relationship like that. They should be able to assist you on what you should be selecting for your program through the FDA. And the next one I have here is, what do I do if a PGA transmission rejects? So if you have a PGA and your transmission rejects, you'll want to make your changes, and then you can resubmit the release or the entry summary if you are transmitting release through entry summary. And then that leads us to, if you had an accepted PGA but you needed to make any changes, what do you do in that instance? So any changes to the PGA data after it has been accepted would need to be submitted via the DIS. So that again, we'll go back through the brief little presentation I gave on the DIS module. You would not be electronically transmitting anything through your entry, but you would use DIS to submit any updated type of paperwork to the applicable agency. The last one I have here is, I have an entry with NHTSA and EPA. Can I submit ACECRL? So as Tammy advised, NHTSA is now live for PGA transmission, but the part that's tricky is the EPA. So if anybody has a PGA that's live and a PGA that isn't, you'll go ahead and transmit the electronic portion of the PGA that applies. So in this case, NHTSA, you'd be good to go ahead and transmit that electronically. As for the EPA, you'd want to go ahead and again use the DIS module to submit your paperwork to the correct agency to get that approved.
The next question is, can LACI be filed through ACECRL release now? Yes. LACI, FDA, and NHTSA are all ready right now. Will the FDA tab be removed and replaced with the PGA tab? Right now, we have both tabs. We have that because you may be storing information in the OGA that you may want to look at to complete the PGA data. Eventually, when everything is running smoothly and they totally eliminate any reason why you would have to revert back to ACS, I'm sure we will get rid of that OGA tab. At that point, we would most likely get rid of the additional trans types too, because ACECRL will be the main SB trans type. What is the difference between the A and B disclaimer in FDA? That is an excellent question. Marcy actually has an email out to FDA requesting a little more definition to each one of those options. Marcy, do we have let's see here. Do you have those written down? Let's show. I want to actually show you what the options are.
Well, the options are A and B.
Right, but what's the definitions? Do you have that off the top of your head?
I don't.
Okay, let's see. So, A, product is not regulated by this agency, or B, the data is not required per the agency guidance.
And that's the FD0.
So B is the FD0.
Correct.
And then A is just you're actually disclaiming. Yes. Okay. So what we can do with that, and we can actually do that later this afternoon, we can put a little more description to those just to make it a little clearer for the users. That's a great question. When will we switch from PGA to OGA? Will PGA also submit prior notice? Well, we're actually switching from OGA to PGA right now. And then about the prior notice. Prior notice, the way you're used to seeing it today, you see the admissibility section in the top of the screen, and then you see the prior notice or the BTA information at the bottom. The way it works today is everything's combined. So prior notice will only ever be on the food. So if you pick FDA and then you pick the program food, then you pick your processing code. In the screens that you see, it's mixed with the admissibility and the prior notice.
The difference there when you're submitting prior notice is going to be in your entities. Your entities are going to be the prior notice submitter or prior notice transmitter. In entering that information, that is going to kick off your FDA prior notice. So that's why I told everybody, make sure you're familiar with the differences between prior notice already received and sending prior notice. It all lies in those entities and in the affirmation of compliance codes that are being sent within those two different types of transactions.
We have a DIS question. Will you ever be able to select documents from the SB imaging system versus having to choose them from the local file system on your PC? Great question. Yes, that is our goal. The way we store the documents today, it's a very, very large project for us today, but our goal, yes, is to be able to just select it from the imaging, since most people now store their documents in our imaging system. So look for that to come in the future. As soon as we have some kind of a timeline, that is a highly requested project, so I will definitely relay that information out to our users.
I have one a little bit related to the DIS as well. People have been asking if you have an ACECRL, that's an RLF entry. Do I need to submit docs still using the AII module and submitting my AII invoices? So instead of having to go back to your home page and creating that AII invoice, the answer to that is no. If you're doing an ACECRL, that is RLF, you can go ahead and use the DIS module to go ahead and submit your documents to CBP if they are required.
There are some cases where you file the ACECRL, and because of the defaults, that the way your system is set up, the system recognizes an RLF, and it actually defaults the invoice information into each one of the line items. We're keeping that the way it is, but the system is going to be smart enough to know that if you're filing an ACECRL, do not send that information in the transmission. So that's something we are working on that you should have very, very soon, probably within the next 10 to 14 days. Right now, users are going in and deleting each of the line items, the invoice information of the line items, and we don't want to have to do that anymore. I have over 100 profiles with FDA disclaimers already set. Do we have to go into each profile and edit to accommodate PGA? No. Marcy or Nicole made reference early on. We have a script where we can take data that exists in your OGA screens today and bring them over into PGA. The issue with that is, let's take LACI. You have LACI information into OGA. Once we take the applicable PGA data elements to create the PGA LACI, I believe there's 4 or 5 missing data elements. So what's going to have to happen is you can ask us to run that script. We'll take and we'll copy any data over and automatically create the PGA. But there is going to be some cleanup on your end. You will have to go into the products and actually clean them up. If you don't, what's going to happen is if you pick that product in an entry, it's going to create the PGA, but not all your data is going to be there. That brings up another really good topic. The mandatory data elements that we have in the system for PGAs today are exactly just that. They are mandatory data elements to get an accepted transmission. What all of the agencies have told us is send them every bit of information that you have. The more information you send them, the quicker you're going to get the may proceed and the 1 USG. Because what's going to happen is if you send the minimal amount of data just to get through a transmission, you may get an accepted transmission, but you're going to get PGA under review. And then you're probably going to get another message stating that, you know, FDA docs are required or whatever the agency happens to be. Then you're going to have to stop, go back to DIS, submit all the documents. DIS is a 100% manual submission to in customs world. What I mean by that is you send documents via DIS, somebody on the other end manually has to see it in the queue and action that. So that's another time lapse that can happen. Then they have to review the documents, the images that you sent, and then you'll get hopefully your may proceed or your 1 USG. So we highly recommend putting all information that you have the first transmission, so that you can get a quicker, faster process, and the faster you get the 1 USG. I see all the entry types except for entry types that start with 3, which are your warehouse withdrawals, should be filed in ACECRL. How about a TIB under 23? It should work now, correct? That is absolutely correct. You can file all entry types except, I believe it's the 31, 32, 33, 34, something. The ones that start with a 3. You can do those today, and you should be doing those today. When we submit prior notice, can the information automatically default to the PGA screen so we don't have to re-enter all of the information? That goes back to the script that I was just talking about, where we can take OGA data to automatically populate and create a PGA data set in your product so that you can use it and you don't have to rekey the information. Will our current FDA info be moved into the new PGA screens? Again, yes, just let us know and we can run that script for you. FDA talks about DUNS numbers. Where do they go? I'm going to refer to Marcy for this one.
Okay, those are going to go in the Entities section. Hang on one sec while I make my way back to the computer and I can show you. Okay, so down here in the Product Entities section, you're going to see the Entity ID type. Here's 16 for your DUNS number, Dun and Bradstreet number. You'd select it and you would enter it here. I do have a link that we got from the FDA webinar that was held by FDA and CBP on Monday. I'm going to go ahead and put that web address in the FDA manuals or in the email that Tammy sends out that has the manuals attached that you can go to. It's a website you can go to get DUNS numbers, to request one. I just think that might be useful to have, but as far as the question goes, it would be entered right here. Okay, so if I send an FDA transmission and it gets rejected, how do I update the data? You would, because it was rejected, you go back into the entry, you update the information, and then just resend your release or your certified release from entry summary. That will send an update, and then that will send the new information to the agency as well. Now, what happens, this brings up another question, what happens if I get an accepted transmission with FDA, but I need to send an update? At this point, you would have to send updated information through DIS. So what I would do is there's a DIS comment section. I would send whatever updated docs or whatever docs I wanted to send to FDA with a note along with the entry number and the line number, explaining to them what information you are updating. Where would FDA registration numbers for manufacturer or grower in the food products be entered? All right, I can demo that real quick. That is going to go in your affirmation of compliance codes. They're all listed here. What was the example? Which one?
FDA registered manufacturer or grower.
All right, here's grower. You would choose that and put in the number. The other ones are in here too. So they're all in this list. Depending on what program you're in, the AOC list is specific to your program. So all those would be found here.
I have a couple questions here. One of them is asking, will the port code pull over into the PGA? Will the lineup value pull over into the PGA? And what about the estimated date of arrival? At this point, there is no information coming from the entry into the PGA screen. That's where we want to go. That's where we need your feedback. So as you're doing something and you're saying, why do I constantly have to put the value? You already know the value. I've entered it at the line item. Those are the type of things we want to hear back from you. We will take all of those and do one project. So we will take one project to say, what data can we pull from the entry into the PGA? You know, and what data can we populate? Like some of the entities that are required for the agencies is the broker. Well, we already know who the broker is. So one of the things on my wish list is, since we, the SmartBorder, the software, already knows who the broker is, well, let's auto-populate that information so users don't even have to think about it. Those are all the things that we have, but we want to hear from you as well. This is going to be constantly updated. The core of what you see will remain the same. We're just going to put added functionality in to make it easier and smoother for the users to enter the data. How many products are we able to enter under one client profile? Unlimited. We have clients who have 30, 40, 50,000 products. The only thing I can tell you is when you have that many products in a profile, searching, showing all, there's a show all products button, that will take a very long time to open up. So we say if you're going to open up, if you're going to store that many products, just be sure to use the search function. When the importer of record is different from the ultimate consignee, how do we specify the ultimate consignee? I think that's referring to the grid that now exists at the header level for ACECRL. It's not just an ultimate consignee box anymore. It's actually the grid where you put your 4 mandatory entities, and consignee being one of them. If that's not the question that you were asking, then please put in a ticket and we'll give you a call to figure that out. One of the other things that I just wanted to show you is we ran some reports last Thursday. As of 12/28 through 1/11, out of all of the releases that were processed in SmartBorder, 16% of them were ACECRL released. 74% of all entry summaries were processed through ACE. Another interesting fact is our very first ACE entry summary was filed in March of 2013. We are going on 3 years now of having something in ACE live. We've been programming for well over 4 years. So we have been living through this now for 4 years. Our goal, and I'm going to run these reports every week and post them in top stories, we need to get this 16% up fairly quickly. So we want to see this number grow quite a bit each week. We need to be prepared for February 28th. That's what I have here. There's one other thing I wanted to show you here. There's some resources here. FDA is putting on a webinar. They had one yesterday. When's their next webinar?
I don't know. They just said they'll be periodic and to watch the CSMS.
Okay, so this was for Tuesdays?
That was
okay.
For yesterday's
All right.
webinar.
There is an ACE Trade daily call that I highly recommend. It's a lot of information. It's also a lot of information regarding any issues that CBP or the agencies are having, especially now with the agencies opening up for NHTSA or for FDA and Lacey. I'm sure that there's been issues that have been found, whether it be the software, whether it be in FDA or CBP. So this call can be very, very informative. So if you're having a problem on this call, you may find other people asking the same question because they're having the same problem. So that's a daily call, and that's open to the entire trade, anyone in the trade. The PGA implementation guides. We don't expect you to go in and actually learn the CATER or anything like that. The reason I put this link up is that at the beginning of each implementation guide, there is some really good information that pertains to the program, to the agency itself and the program. So one of the questions that just came in is if I'm doing an FDA entry and I don't know what program to put it under. That's something we can't help you with, unfortunately. We don't have enough information on the product or the importer. So you would have to go to your importer or your client to get the information, but I also recommend reviewing looking at the beginning of each of the, like the FDA implementation guide to see if there's some information there that will help you decide what program it falls under. And then of course we have the SmartBorder email address to quickly send a ticket in, help@smartborder.com. If you have an issue, send the issue and the screenshot to help. It'll automatically create a ticket for you. One of the other things that we found, especially with more and more of our users filing the PGA responses that are coming back are very technical. For instance, we had somebody filing on Monday a NHTSA shipment, and the reject was PG07 missing. So they call us up or they put a ticket in, we call them, they have no idea what a PG07 is. So what I've done is I've taken at a very high level and I have created this document which will tell you, so if you look PG07, that's the trade name section in the FDA or the NHTSA screen. So if you get something that says the PG18 missing, this will sort of help guide you to, okay, I have a problem in my hazardous material block of data. This is just something that you can have on hand just to guide you. Now, on the trade call last week, Customs did say that they're going to eventually clean up those messages and actually put, trade name missing instead of a PG07. We have no idea when that'll be done, so I thought this might be of some help. We have a few more questions that just came in. Has ACECRL been turned on yet for RLF brokers? ACECRL is an option for all SmartBorder filers. So you should, every one of us should have that option. If documents are submitted to FDA via DIS, do I still need to use the FDA ITAX interface? I'm not quite understanding the question, but my first response would be it would have to be filed electronically. Now that FDA is opened up, you would have to file those documents electronically in your entry, and then if Customs needed more information, then you would just take those documents and then file them via DIS. Will the manuals be available after the webinar? Yes. On your GoToMeeting screen, under where you submitted the questions, there's a handout section. There are 5 attachments, 5 of the FDA manuals attached. After this webinar, probably tomorrow afternoon or Friday morning, we will be sending out a copy of the webinar to everyone, along with the manuals for FDA, LACI, and NHTSA, just to make sure everybody has the most up-to-date. We'll send those all out, and we will also send a list of the questions along with the answers. Can you default entity information? This is another really good one. Can you default entity information into the FDA screens? For our mapping that we did, the script that we take the OGA data and we populate the FDA data, if you could think about the OGA screens where you have the, shipper, FDA shipper and FDA manufacturer, if you used a trans party to populate that field, we will go out, find that trans party name and address, and populate it when we auto-create the PGA. So the answer to that is yes and no. Whatever data we can populate entity information from the OGA screen, we will. but there may be entities that are required that are not required for OGA, so we wouldn't have access to that. So again, that comes into where you have to do a little bit of cleanup. Okay, so I think that's the end of all of the questions that we have for right now. So the key to all of this is start processing ACECRL entries immediately. Another thing I wanted to mention is if you have an issue with an ACECRL, please don't automatically revert to CRL and not let us know what the issue is. Now is the time to fix any issue, to fix any problems. If it's a software issue, we need to know about it so we can fix it immediately. If it's not a software issue, we need to be able to go out to CBP, find out what the issue is, because there are issues, and Marcy can tell you firsthand that during her FDA testing, she found things that we were doing exactly the way the guide tells us, but it was an issue with FDA. She would go to FDA, they would say, thank you very much for letting us know, and they fix it. So we need to do those types of back and forth before February 28th. We want to get all of the bugs, all of the unknowns. I had a Lacey shipment today right before the call where the user was getting a very strange error. I couldn't figure it out. And I happened to notice that in the Lacey screen where it asks for an email or a fax, they put a fax number in. In all of our testing here, we were putting emails in. So by chance, I put an email address in and it fixed the issue. So come to find out, we updated the Lacey manual, and we also have to update the Lacey screen. It requires an email. Fax is not allowed for Lacey. So it's little things like that that we don't want to wait until February 28th to find out. So please report any issues that you may have going forward. We're here to help. Just let us know whatever we can do to help you. We're here for you. So with that, I think we're all set. The poll, yes, thank you. Right here. I have one quick poll that I want to do. I just want to find out if you find the webinar to be helpful. So if you quickly just answer that. Okay, perfect. So it looks like out of the entire panel, we have there is 1%. So there's one lone person who found that this information wasn't helpful to them, and that's okay. What we're going to do is give that person a call, and then we can find out exactly what we can do to help. You know, these are the types of things we need from you guys. So I'm happy to hear that 99% of you found the information helpful. If there's anything we can do going forward, please don't hesitate to let us know, ask us, we're here, and we're all working together.
And last thing I just wanted to mention again, if anybody hasn't gotten their ACECRLs, because we took that poll, if you haven't even transmitted an ACECRL and perhaps you didn't get the one-on-one training, please let us know ASAP. We would love to schedule the go-to meeting to work with you one-on-one to go through the details, you know, again, one-on-one for any of those questions. So please don't be scared to put in a help ticket letting us know that you want your ACECRL training.
Okay. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.